1,000 years had passed since humanity's extinction, and the galaxy had settled into a false sense of peace. The once feared species, erased from the stars, had become little more than a forgotten myth. But when the first human-made signal echoed through deep space, the universe was reminded of a terrible truth. Humans never truly die. They rise stronger than ever. And this time, no one is safe. For 1,000 years, the galaxy had lived in peace. It was the kind of peace that came from the kind of extinction only humanity could achieve. Earth had fallen burned, decayed, and vanished without a trace. And with it, the chaotic unpredictable, and oh so dangerous humans. The galaxy had moved on. The giant empires of the stars breathed easier. No more worrying about Earth's misunderstood influence. No more last-minute calls to the Galactic Council about human antics. Those wild, unruly creatures who once sent shockwaves through the cosmos were now nothing more than a memory gone, forgotten, and never to return. At least that's what everyone believed. The galaxy had done its best to forget the chaotic little species that had once threatened to outsmart, outfight, and outlive everything the universe had to offer. The Elfari, ancient and wise, felt a deep, smug satisfaction at their survival. The Zarni, fierce and terrifying, danced their victory songs. The Tredians, experts in diplomacy, sighed in relief that they would never again have to endure another human negotiation. Peace was here. It was supposed to last forever. But sometimes the universe has a funny way of slapping you across the face with reality. It started with an insignificant signal, barely a flicker on the galaxy's most advanced monitoring systems. At first, it was so weak, so unremarkable, that no one gave it a second thought. The data would have been easily ignored by anyone else, but the Galactic Council had learned from bitter experience to never completely ignore anything, especially when it came to Earth. The signal originated from a part of space that, on paper, was completely dead. Human colonies? Long gone? Human technology? A heap of rusted scrap metal, likely lost in time. Yet there it was, impossibly alive. A message composed of simple, cryptic words: "We're back." Was it a mistake? A glitch in the system? A galactic prank? Possibly. But no one was laughing. The message was ignored at first, brushed off as a mere anomaly. After all, humanity had been gone for centuries, right? No need to lose sleep over a weird transmission. That's what the Council told themselves, even as a growing sense of unease began creeping through their ranks. Those who remembered human history, who remembered the sheer audacity, the stubbornness, and the occasional insanity of humanity, knew better than to dismiss such things. After all, humans didn't go quietly into extinction. They went out with a bang, like someone setting off fireworks in a high-security prison. Nothing subtle about that. Still, the galaxy continued its daily grind. Empires expanded, resources were mined, and the political wheel churned on. Until the second signal came. And then the third. And then, much to everyone's horror, the signals were coming in by the dozen, each one just a little more coherent than the last. And the source? Earth. But that couldn't be right. Earth was gone. The humans had vanished. The galaxy's leaders had ensured that nothing would be left behind except for a few crumbling ruins, monuments to a species that had once caused the galaxy a great deal of chaos. But deep inside the ruins of Earth, something stirred. Something far worse than anyone could have imagined. The very thought that humanity had simply vanished, never to rise again, had been a comforting lie. Now the truth was becoming painfully clear. They had only been waiting. And in the cold silence of deep space, Earth had healed. Reports started coming in, small ones, seemingly insignificant but undeniably connected to the human presence. Some of the most remote outposts began to receive strange human-made tech, artifacts, and debris, all showing signs of being untouched by time. Some of these items were hundreds of years old, but they still worked perfectly. No rust, no degradation, no signs of disrepair. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, and all of humanity's old technology had suddenly powered back up. And what made it worse? It was working better than before. The first fleet sent to investigate was a mix of the galaxy's finest and most skeptical minds. They thought it was an ancient relic, an old experiment gone awry, or some sort of harmless quirk of forgotten tech. What they didn't realize was that they were walking straight into a hornet's nest. By the time the fleet arrived, they were no longer prepared for what they would find. The ruins of Earth? They were still there, but what had emerged from the ashes was something altogether different. Humanity had reinvented itself. And it wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The old cities, the ones that had once crumbled under the weight of their own ambition, were now bustling with activity. The technology had advanced beyond the imagination of even the oldest alien species. Humanity had rebuilt itself not from scratch, but from the essence of what made them dangerous in the first place. They had adapted. They had survived. They had evolved. And they were not interested in negotiating. In fact, the first thing the Galactic Fleet saw as they approached Earth's orbit was a massive ship, shaped like nothing they had ever encountered. It was sleek, modern, and unnervingly familiar. It wasn't an old relic at all. It was the future, and it was coming straight for them. And that was just the beginning. The signal had been received, analyzed, and dismissed. At least that's what the Council tried to convince themselves. A human transmission? Ridiculous. Earth was nothing more than a haunted relic of the past. The last remaining monument to the most unpredictable species the galaxy had ever known. Who would have thought humanity could come back from extinction? What was next? The Tradians getting drunk and sending out heartfelt apologies for their centuries of self-righteousness. But then the second signal came, and then the third. Each one was more refined, more deliberate. And each one made a chilling statement: we're back. The Council, for the first time in centuries, began to feel the weight of history pressing down on them. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. The galaxy was supposed to be at peace. For the first time, they wondered if they'd made a grave mistake in dismissing the very species that had once nearly burned the universe to the ground. In the chaos of this realization, they did what any competent Galactic Council would do. They sent a fleet to investigate. A small one. At first. Just a few ships, nothing too big. After all, it was probably just some leftover tech or a forgotten message in a dusty corner of space. But just to be safe, they decided to call in the big guns, a group of the most seasoned and skeptical officers in the galaxy. The fleet's leader, Captain Threx, was a veteran of more wars than he cared to count. The mere idea of humans coming back from the dead was absurd. He had fought alongside the Tradians during the war, and he'd watched entire fleets of alien ships crumble under the weight of humanity's stubbornness. There was no way they could have returned, he told himself. It was all a coincidence. Some old transmission system kicking on randomly, an ancient probe malfunctioning. Maybe a relic of humanity's past, sent out like a beacon, fading into the unknown. Relax, Captain Threx muttered to himself as the fleet powered toward Earth's coordinates. This will be a simple recon mission. In and out. No big deal. What greeted them, however, was anything but simple. As the fleet approached Earth's once barren orbit, the first thing they noticed was the sheer scale of the ships that had been assembled around the planet. The humans had always been good at one thing: overachieving. What had once been a collection of small colonies, scattered and fragile, had transformed into a formidable naval presence. The human-made vessels were sleek, streamlined, and deadly, everything the galaxy had expected, but nothing it had prepared for. The ships, despite their age, gleamed with advanced energy signatures. They weren't just functional, they were cutting edge. One of the officers aboard the lead ship, Lieutenant Zarnak, couldn't suppress a laugh. Are we sure this is Earth? I don't remember seeing anything this shiny when I passed by last time. Did they get a new coat of paint? Keep it together, Lieutenant, Captain Threx barked, but even he couldn't hide the unease creeping into his voice. We don't know what we're dealing with here. The fleet continued to close in, and soon, Earth came into view. The planet, once a desolate wasteland, was now a vibrant, almost unsettlingly alive world. It wasn't just thriving, it was pulsing with energy. Cities that had long been reduced to rubble were now alive with activity, sprawling metropolises that stretched across the horizon. But this wasn't the Earth they had read about in their history books. It was something else entirely. Something that defied all logic and expectation. Well, this is awkward, muttered Ensign Jorik, the young, wide-eyed officer who had volunteered for the mission out of a sense of duty and perhaps a bit of naivety. I mean, I thought we were coming to investigate a graveyard, not a booming metropolis. Stay focused, Captain Threx said. We've got a job to do. Prepare for communication." But no sooner had he spoken than a strange transmission blared across the fleet's comms. It wasn't a message. It wasn't even a warning. It was an invitation. "Welcome home," the voice said, calm and unbothered. It was human, undeniably human. Threx froze. What in the galaxy? The voice continued, as though they were having a casual conversation. "We've been waiting. Hope you brought snacks." It took every ounce of willpower for the crew not to laugh in disbelief. This was supposed to be a military operation. The fate of the galaxy could very well hinge on what happened next, and yet snacks. "This is a joke, right?" Ensign Jork asked, turning to Zarnak. Zarnak didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the planet below, and it was clear to everyone aboard the fleet that the calm, composed humanity they'd once known was no more. Instead, this was something else, something dangerous. Captain Threx swallowed hard. "All ships prepare for immediate deployment. This isn't a negotiation anymore. This is war." But as the fleet made its final approach, one thing became abundantly clear. Humanity wasn't interested in peace, diplomacy, or diplomacy. They were interested in one thing, reminding the galaxy exactly who was in charge. And they had been waiting for this moment for 1,000 years. One thing was certain now: the Council had underestimated humanity, and the universe would soon pay the price. The fleet's arrival was met with a sense of eerie calm. For all the tension in the air, the vast expanse of Earth's orbit was eerily quiet. The ships hovered, still as statues, reflecting the light of the distant sun. And yet there was a palpable energy, an almost tangible hum vibrating through the space around them. Humanity had waited for 1,000 years, and now the moment had come. On board the lead ship, Captain Threx tried to maintain his composure. He'd seen countless war zones, watched entire civilizations fall, and faced down enemies that had given even the toughest of soldiers pause. But this felt different. He stood in front of the massive viewport, staring out into the sea of human ships that had assembled. The scale was staggering. It wasn't just a military force, it was an empire. And it wasn't a ragtag bunch of survivors. They had built this fleet with a precision that spoke volumes. If the galaxy had any doubt that humanity was a species to be reckoned with, they wouldn't have it for much longer. Threx straightened his uniform. "Ready all communications. We're about to make first contact. Again. Again." The officers around him murmured in agreement, though none of them seemed particularly eager to engage. There was a nervous energy that hung over the entire ship, one that couldn't be shaken off no matter how much bravado they tried to muster. As far as the galaxy was concerned, humanity had been wiped out. The stories of their savage brilliance had been reduced to myth. And now they were back, and no one knew what to expect. A strange buzz filled the comms. It wasn't a traditional transmission. It wasn't even a message. It was a greeting, unsettlingly casual. The voice on the other end didn't have the slightest hint of fear or hostility. It was as though they had been expecting this very moment. "Hey there, big guys," the voice said, smooth and confident. "Glad you could make it. We've been kind of busy, but we've got time for a chat." The Council's finest officers stared at each other. "Is this some kind of joke?" Lieutenant Zarnak asked, his voice shaky. "Are they mocking us?" Captain Threx didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached over and flipped a switch. The voice boomed out of the speakers once again. "We figured you'd show up eventually. We were getting a bit bored. Hope you brought something better than a few old warships. We've got an upgrade on the way. You're gonna love it." Captain Threx clenched his fists. "That's it. Open the comms. I'll talk to them directly." He took a deep breath and keyed the microphone. "This is Captain Threx of the Galactic Council fleet. I demand to know who you are and what you're planning." The voice on the other end chuckled, a warm, relaxed chuckle that made Threx's blood boil. "Demand? Oh, that's cute. Look, we're not here to negotiate, Captain. We just wanted to say surprise. You thought you got rid of us? Well, we've got news for you. We're back, and we've got bigger plans." Threx's jaw tightened. "What do you want from the galaxy?" The voice grew thoughtful for a moment. as if considering the question carefully. What do we want? Well, let's see. First, we want to remind everyone that humanity never really died. It's just we took a little nap. Now we're back, and we're stronger than you could ever imagine. Second, we want some respect. Third, we want all the tech we missed while we were, gone. And don't think for 1 second that we'll be polite about it. The council officers exchanged glances. This wasn't the humanity they remembered. The people who had once been unpredictable were now bold, assertive, and shockingly arrogant. Threx steeled himself. You are no longer the humans we once knew. You're a threat to galactic peace. If you don't back down immediately, we'll be forced to use force. The voice was unfazed. Oh, come on. Do you really think we'd come all this way just to be lectured by a bunch of space bureaucrats? You think you can threaten us? Let me tell you something, Captain. We've learned a few things over the last 1,000 years. And if you think we're going to cower in front of some council from the far reaches of the galaxy, you've got another thing coming. The voice cut off and the ship's screens lit up with a burst of data. The fleet shields were already activating, their weapons primed and ready for action. A small, harmless-looking ship detached from the center of Earth's orbit, slowly making its way toward the fleet. It was sleek, unmarked, and radiated power. The officers aboard Threx's ship exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't a scout ship. This was something far more dangerous. Lieutenant Zarnak swallowed. What do we do now, sir? Captain Threx didn't look away from the screen. Now. We pray we're not about to get the worst surprise of our lives. The ship glided closer, and as it neared, a single line appeared across the screens, initiating welcome protocol. Threx's mind raced. Welcome protocol? He muttered. Are they joking? Did they send a fleet to shake our hands? But as the ship closed the distance, it was clear this was no diplomatic gesture. The sheer power radiating from the human ship made the Council fleet look like a group of children with toy guns. And the more Threx stared at the incoming vessel, the more he realized this was a signal. Not just a message, but a warning. And it was too late to turn back. The human ship, sleek and menacing, continued its slow approach toward Captain Threx's fleet. Its silhouette, framed by the cold expanse of space, seemed to mock everything the Council had come to know about power. It wasn't just another ship, it was a statement, one that screamed, we're not just back, we're in charge now. Threx clenched his fists on the command console, his knuckles white. What in the galaxy are they playing at? He muttered. His crew was restless, their eyes glued to the monitors, waiting for a sign of what to do next. The voice from Earth still echoed and his ears relaxed, amused and impossibly confident. Lieutenant Zarnak, ever the skeptic, piped up, maybe they're just looking for a tour guide. A little sightseeing. Probably a museum visit. Oh, look. The wreckage of the Galactic Council fleet. Good times. No one laughed. Zarnak's joke had the life sucked out of it the moment the ship's shields flared to life. The calm exterior of the human vessel vanished as energy shields hummed into existence, crackling with power that made the Council's ships look like toys next to a star. The irony of it wasn't lost on anyone. Here they were, a vast fleet of the galaxy's finest, about to be outclassed by a single human ship, like a lion in a pen with a housecat who just found a laser pointer. The tension aboard the Council flagship was suffocating, and it didn't help that the human ship remained silent, almost as if it was just watching them. Threx had seen enough standoffs to know that silence could be deadly. It was like waiting for a bomb to go off, except this time, the bomb wasn't even hiding. It was standing right in front of them, smirking. Sir, the human ship is requesting to communicate, Ensign Jorek said nervously, breaking the silence. They say it's important. Important? Threx echoed. Tell them we're busy. And if it's a joke, they better be prepared for the punchline to be the end of their entire species. His words were far less confident than he intended, and everyone on the bridge knew it. His bravado was fading fast. With one hand, he gestured to open the comms channel. The screen flickered, and there, on the main view, appeared the same relaxed voice that had greeted them before. This time, the speaker's face was visible, a human, lounging back in what appeared to be a very comfortable chair, sipping something in a mug that looked suspiciously like coffee. Captain Threx, the voice said, as if they were old pals catching up after a long day. I'm glad you made it. Now, let's get down to business, shall we? Threx didn't bother hiding his disbelief. What business? You've got a fleet that could crush us in an instant, and you're calling this business? What do you want? The human smiled a slow, confident grin. I just want you to understand that we're not here to negotiate. We're not here for your peace treaties or trade deals. We're here for one thing and one thing only, to remind you of what happens when you underestimate humanity. Underestimate? Threx's voice was tight, almost desperate. You can't possibly think that after 1,000 years we're not worried about what happened 1,000 years ago. The human interrupted. We're worried about now. You see, when we left, we didn't vanish. We were just recharging. Think of it like taking a long nap. And you know what they say, Captain, don't wake up a sleeping giant. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the entire bridge seemed to hold its breath. Threx knew what he had to say next, but the words felt like stones in his mouth. We won't back down, he said, his voice more a growl than anything. We will fight to the last ship. The human on the screen raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Because here's the thing, Captain, we've been waiting for 1,000 years. But we don't need to fight, not yet. Anyway, you can still leave. Turn around, go home, and we'll call it a day. Leave? Threx repeated, incredulous. You think we'll just? You will, the human interrupted again, their tone never changing. You'll leave or we'll make you leave. Threx's eyes narrowed. This was no bluff. The human was too calm, too sure of themselves. There was no hesitation in their voice, and that sent a cold chill down his spine. Every instinct he had screamed at him to retreat, but pride and years of training pushed him to stand firm. We will not be intimidated, Threx said, his voice colder now. If you want war, you've got it. The human's grin widened. War? Captain, you're already in it. You just don't know it yet. But don't worry, we'll make it quick. You'll be begging for peace before the week's out. And just like that, the transmission cut off. For a long moment, the bridge fell into complete silence. Threx stared at the empty screen, his mind racing. The human fleet was too powerful, too prepared, and they didn't seem to care about the consequences. They had already been prepared to face the galaxy's might. Are we really going to let them do this? Lieutenant Zarnak whispered, his voice betraying a rare fear. Are we really going to just give in? Threx didn't answer right away. He stared out the viewport, watching as the human ship took its place at the front of the fleet. It wasn't just an invasion anymore. It was a message. A declaration. Humanity was back, and the galaxy was about to find out what that truly meant. And somehow Threx knew no matter how many ships they had, no matter the size of their fleet, he had already lost. All ships, prepare for engagement, he ordered, his voice hard. But keep in mind, we may not be the ones calling the shots here. He wasn't just preparing for battle anymore. He was preparing for something far worse. The moment the transmission ended, the atmosphere on the bridge of the Council flagship shifted. It was no longer about diplomacy or threats. It was a fight for survival, and for the first time in Captain Threx's career, he wasn't sure they could win this one. The human ship had taken its position at the head of the fleet, and the space around it seemed to hum with an energy that felt more like a storm brewing than a peaceful standoff. The Council ships, all armed to the teeth, were now staring down what could be the most monumental miscalculation of their entire existence. They thought humanity was gone. They thought the galaxy would remain in peace. But humanity wasn't gone. It had simply been waiting. Threx's mind raced as he paced in front of the view screen. Prepare all weapons, he ordered sharply. I want every ship ready for combat. The second we engage, there's no turning back, no hesitation. Understood, sir, came the response from his crew. Their voices lacked the usual confidence. They were all feeling it now. This was not a skirmish. This wasn't even a battle. This was a reckoning. Lieutenant Zarnak, who had been glued to the sensors, finally broke the silence. Sir, there's something happening. The human ship, it's expanding. It's not just sitting there. Threx's eyes snapped to the screen. Expanding. What do you mean expanding? Zarnak didn't have a clear answer, but the ship's display showed something that sent a wave of unease through the crew. The human vessel wasn't just a ship, it was a mobile fortress. Its hull was unfurling like a blooming flower, revealing weapons systems and energy cannons hidden within its sleek frame. It was transforming before their very eyes, evolving from something sleek into something catastrophic. And it wasn't alone. As if in perfect synchronization, the other ships in the human fleet followed suit. They were no longer simple warships, they were mobile battle stations, each one a marvel of destructive technology. Captain, Zarnak said, voice trembling, I don't think they came here to negotiate anymore. No kidding, Threx muttered, his face pale. They came to take over. Sir, Ensign Jorah called from the communications console, we're getting another transmission. I don't think I want to hear it, Threx said, shaking his head. But despite his words, he knew he had no choice. They had no idea what they were up against, and every bit of information counted. Patch it through, he ordered. The screen flickered once again, and this time the human face that appeared was different. No longer casual, no longer amused. The human was now all business. Their expression was cold, calculated unlike anything Threx had seen before. A leader? A general? It didn't matter. The message was clear. Captain, the human said, voice smooth and deadly serious, we don't want this to get messy. You've been given an option. Leave. Now. Or we'll make you regret it. Threx's gut clenched. He had expected arrogance, but this was something else. It was the kind of confidence you could only get after 1,000 years of planning, 1,000 years of rebuilding, 1,000 years of waiting. Threx held his ground. You think you can just walk in here and demand we leave our own space? This is the Council's territory. You're trespassing. The human didn't flinch. You had your time, they said. The galaxy was yours. But things change. And you're about to find out just how much we don't care about your council. We don't care about your fleets. You either leave, or we wipe the slate clean. Wipe the slate clean? Threx repeated, incredulous. You're bluffing. You can't. I'm not bluffing, the human said with an eerie calmness. You will see. It's not about the ships, Captain. It's about what's inside them. We've learned to push the boundaries of what's possible. And now we're going to make you watch as we push the boundaries of what's survivable. The transmission cut out, leaving the crew in stunned silence. Threx's mind raced. He had seen military strength before, but this was something new. Humanity had been underestimated, dismissed, and forgotten. And now they were showing the galaxy exactly why that was a monumental mistake. Sir, Zarnak said, breaking the tension. They're moving. They're coming at us. Threx stood frozen for a moment, watching the human fleet move with unnerving precision. It was clear they were no longer playing around. The energy readings coming from their ships were off the charts, and the hum of their weapon systems seemed to vibrate through the entire ship. Brace for impact, Threx said, his voice grim. Prepare for full-scale combat. All shields up. Fire at will. But even as the words left his mouth, Threx couldn't shake the feeling that this battle would be different. The Council fleet had fought and won countless wars, but humanity had always been a wild card. The kind of species you didn't bet against. The kind of species that could lose everything and still come back stronger than anyone could imagine. And as the first salvo of energy blasts lit up the vastness of space, Threx realized something chilling. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for relevance. For the very idea that the galaxy could continue as it had before. Humanity was back. And the galaxy would never be the same. The first blast hit the Council flagship's shields with a force that sent shockwaves through the entire ship. It wasn't just an impact, it was a statement. Captain Threx could almost hear the human ships laughing as their weapons tore through the vacuum of space, intent on making a mockery of the Council's might. The crew on the bridge scrambled to respond, their hands moving in a flurry of motion, but for every defense they activated, the humans adapted with ruthless precision. Energy pulses streaked across the vastness of space, and the Council fleet began to disintegrate in front of their eyes, like paper caught in a flame. Shields holding at 40%, Captain. Ensign Jorik yelled, his voice cracking as the ship shuddered under another blow. 40%. Threx hissed, barely able to hide the panic in his voice. The human ships weren't just outgunning them, they were outthinking them. Every move the Council made was anticipated, every defense countered. It was like they were fighting against a fleet of precognitive geniuses. "Send out a distress signal," Threx barked. "We need reinforcements now." Zarnak's hands flew over the console. "No use, sir. We're being jammed. We can't reach anyone. They're blocking all communications." "Of course they are," Threx muttered bitterly, his fists clenched at his sides. It felt like the entire galaxy had just pulled out a front-row seat to watch the Council burn. Another salvo of plasma torpedoes zipped past the ship, narrowly missing them but leaving a trail of destruction that could be seen from a light year away. The ships around them were already breaking apart, pieces of their once pristine hulls floating in space like debris from a failed experiment. It was chaos. Absolute chaos. And the human fleet, they were moving through it like predators in a field of wounded prey. "We can't keep this up," Zarnak said, his voice low, barely audible over the sirens blaring across the ship. "They've got us outgunned. Outclassed. If we don't do something fast, we're done for." Threx's mind raced. Desperation was beginning to set in, and it wasn't the kind of feeling that suited a captain of his caliber. He wasn't used to being on the losing side of a fight, let alone being so thoroughly outclassed. But this wasn't just a fight. This was a humiliation. He had led the Council's greatest fleet into a slaughterhouse, and there was no escaping it. "Focus." Threx snapped, trying to shake the growing sense of dread. "We're not finished yet. Bring all weapons online. If we're going down, we're taking a few of them with us." "Sir," Jorik shouted. "The humans, they've just deployed something new." Threx turned, the hair on the back of his neck standing up. "New? What the hell does that mean?" Jorik pointed to the viewport, where a massive glowing energy formation had appeared in front of the human ships. It was unlike anything Threx had ever seen. The human vessels were generating what looked like a singularity, a miniature black hole of sorts, its gravity distorting space itself. "They're pulling in our ships," Zarnak gasped, his eyes wide. "It's like a gravity well, but stronger." The Council flagship's hull creaked, groaned, and began to pull toward the event horizon of the artificial singularity. There was no escaping it. The ship's thrusters fired in a desperate attempt to break free, but the gravitational pull only grew stronger. "This is it, isn't it?" Zarnak said, his voice shaking. "They're going to swallow us whole." Threx didn't answer. He couldn't. Instead, he watched as the other ships in the fleet began to disintegrate, slowly pulled into the black hole, their systems failing as their structures were stretched and torn apart by the sheer force of the gravity. The human fleet hadn't just beaten them, they had outclassed them in ways that didn't even make sense. They had leveled the playing field by creating something no one could anticipate. Then, as if the universe itself was mocking them, a communication pinged through. A cold, emotionless voice filled the bridge. "Captain Threx," the voice said. "It's time for you to understand. The war you thought you were fighting, that was just us shaking off the rust. Now we're really getting started. The Council's reign is over, and you're the first to know." Threx's fists were white-knuckled on the console. "You. We warned you," the human continued, their voice calm, unbothered. "You had a choice. You could have walked away. But now, well, now you'll be the first to witness the future of this galaxy." With those words, the communication cut off, and the gravity well expanded, consuming the remains of the fleet in a slow, agonizing pull. But even as his ship neared its doom, Threx couldn't help but feel a flicker of something. It wasn't hope, exactly, but it was something close to it, fear, mixed with awe. Humanity had come back, yes. But more than that, they had come back with a vengeance. And for the first time in his life, Captain Threx realized something far more terrifying than losing a battle. They weren't just a threat to the Council. They were a threat to the galaxy itself. The very idea that the Council had been the peak of power seemed absurd now, as if the universe was laughing at the delusion. And the humans? They were no longer just a species. They were a force of nature, a storm that could never be stopped. The final moments of the Council fleet were nothing short of cataclysmic. Threx's once proud flagship was now a slow-moving wreck, dragged ever closer to the heart of the artificial singularity that humanity had so effortlessly conjured. The rest of the Council's ships had already met their fate, torn apart by a force they couldn't even begin to comprehend. The bridge of the flagship was a cacophony of alarms, flashing lights, and frantic crew members scrambling to salvage anything they could. But Threx could only watch in stunned silence as the crushing weight of inevitability pressed down on them. "We're losing power in all sectors, Captain," Zarnak called out, his voice strained. "We've got less than 5 minutes before we're fully consumed." Threx didn't respond. What could he say? Nothing they did would change the outcome now. The Council's once mighty fleet had been reduced to a fraction of its former self. The human ships had shredded them without effort, as though it were a game they were bored of halfway through. But just as the singularity grew ever closer, something unexpected happened. The human fleet, which had been systematically dismantling the Council ships, suddenly stopped. The energy pulses ceased. The giant gravity well began to retract. Threx blinked, confused. Was it a trap? Was this another tactic to toy with them before the final blow? Report. Threx barked, his pulse racing. Zarnak's fingers flew across his console. "Sir, I don't know. The human ships, they're retreating. They're just pulling back." "What?" Threx gasped. "Pulling back? Why?" Zarnak stared at the screen, his eyes wide. It looks like they're letting us go." "Letting us go?" Threx repeated, incredulity creeping into his voice. "After everything? After all this?" The human voice that filled the communication channel was eerily calm, as though they were speaking to a child who had just learned an important lesson. "Captain Threx," the voice said, "we've made our point. You were warned, and you didn't listen. But we won't finish you off. Not today." Threx stared at the screen, trying to process what he was hearing. You're just going to let us live." The human laughed, a short, cold chuckle. "We could finish you now. We have the power to wipe your entire fleet from existence with the flick of a switch. But that's not our way. We believe in teaching lessons. And this is the first lesson of many. The Council's time has passed. It's ours now. You're lucky we're allowing you to learn the hard way." Threx's chest tightened as the human words sank in. You think the Council will just let you have everything. The galaxy is still ours to control. You've only delayed the inevitable." The human's voice was almost pitying. "We haven't just delayed the inevitable. We've changed it. Forever." A strange, disorienting silence filled the bridge. For the first time in his life, Threx felt completely powerless. No battle plan, no fleet formation, no amount of tactics could prepare him for this. The humans weren't just strong, they were surgical, calculated, and terrifyingly patient. Zarnak turned away from his console, his face pale. "Captain, what do we do now? We're not going to survive this if we don't take action." Threx's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and anger. He wanted to lash out, to order an attack, to show the humans that the Council still had a few tricks left. But deep down, he knew it would be pointless. The humans had already won. The galaxy that the Council had spent millennia shaping was now a relic of the past. The voice from the human fleet came again, cutting through the tension like a razor. "Consider this a gift, Captain Threx. The chance to walk away. To rethink the choices you've made. But know this, we are coming for every corner of this galaxy. And you're either with us or you're against us. There is no middle ground. We will not stop. And we will not be denied." The transmission ended, leaving Threx in a stunned silence. He looked at his crew, who were equally speechless. Some were staring at the view screen in disbelief. Others were looking at the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. It was clear everyone had come to the same conclusion. The Council, as they had known it, was finished. Threx took a deep breath and stood straighter, trying to find the resolve that had once made him one of the most respected officers in the fleet. But now it felt like all that respect had evaporated into nothingness. It was hard to remember who he had been before this. The galaxy had been his, and now it wasn't. And in its place was humanity, a species that had been underestimated, forgotten, and ultimately awakened. The Council's reign had ended, and a new era had begun, one that Threx couldn't even begin to fathom. "Set course for the nearest starbase," Threx finally ordered, his voice hoarse. "We need to regroup. We need to rethink our strategy." He didn't know if that was even possible. In truth, he didn't know if there was anything left to regroup. The human fleet had delivered a final, crushing blow, and now it was clear nothing would ever be the same. Humanity had come back stronger than anyone could have imagined, and the rest of the galaxy, they were about to feel the full weight of what that meant. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sci-Fi Horizon Stories for more thrilling tales of science fiction and adventure. And remember, when humanity comes knocking, you might want to answer with more than just a polite hello, because the next time they show up, they won't be bringing cookies.